going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, and you're here for another episode of the Facts Project. Today, special guest, you have Travis B. Hill and you have Sheldon Allen. We are here to talk about Thorn for Advent Comics. Thank you for being here, to both of you.
Thank you, James. Happy to be here. Yeah, love the show. So glad we're on it.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to have the both of you here. So, for one, I got pretty much my introduction into Thorn, I'm going to say last year, with issue 0 that was put out free to the public. And it was also on your website, and you can still look that up as of right now. What, TravisHillComics.com or TravisBHillComics.com?
Yeah, TravisBHillComics.com. Anybody who wants to read it, it is free up there.
Definitely. So what we're talking about, of course, we're talking about Thorn today, everybody. And of course, Travis, you're the writer of Thorn, and Sheldon, you are the script consultant for Thorn, correct?
That is correct.
Now, of course, the story in its truest form, as far as like the origin and how it was constructed and how it was created, the character itself can be a multitude of things. It can be a story all on its own of how the dynamic of a black man in the Deep South can look at the normal yet immoral factors of his neighborhood and pretty much see and take it within himself to come up with a plan and make it easier for everybody by not only just calling himself a vigilante, but actually taking care of his neighborhood inside and outside of being the character of Thorn himself. So when I'm looking at it from issue 0, Travis, if you can help me, from issue 0, where he's having a conversation in his living room with his friend Alton and a friend of his who's a cop.
Isaiah, yeah. So you have Alton's a main character, and he's got his 2 buddies, Isaiah, who's a police officer, and then Jay, another friend of his, who you get more into in issue 1 and that kind of thing.
Right. And you come to see it, like, of course, with him keeping his identity low profile.
Right.
They're talking about things that are basically have been coming up and happening in the neighborhood that Thorn has been interfering with.
Mm-hmm.
And the character of Isaiah can play many parts as far as reality is concerned, because he's not only just a police officer, he's a black police officer in the Deep South, in the neighborhood, and he's stuck between like 2 boundaries. You know what I'm saying? He could either be with his boys and everything, shooting the shit about everything that's happening in the neighborhood, but yet he's still a police officer, and that's his job. That's his bread and butter. This is how I make my money. So this whole you know what I'm saying? This is how I make my money. This is my way of life. But yet he gets into a situation literally right after the scene where he gets a call, and there's a young man, maybe around 15 years old, who has a gun on him. Texas is an open carry state.
Mm.
And out of nowhere, like literally probably like 3 cop cars come up. Isaiah is trying to rectify the matter. He wants to basically dissolve the situation before it happens. Thorn comes in and just takes care of business. This then proves, like, basically, like later on down the line with issues 1 and issues 2, as you're going to start going through this, that there's a deeper factor that Thorn is going through in the creation of the character that he displays now within his neighborhood. What brings him to this moment?
So he is, if you get into the issues of 1, 2, 3, issue 1 coming out July 5th, you see backstory. So it's a 12-issue series, and each issue tells a little bit of his backstory in chronological order from when he's a young teenager, to the moment where he makes the decision to become Thorn. So you move through a lot of time. Mm-hmm. Probably what'll take place over about 12 to 13 years for the character in backstory as it moves forward. And he, again, the book itself deals with the vigilante trope of believing that you've experienced this injustice that you don't want to see others experience anymore. And so what we see with Alton in his backstory that leads him to Thorn is this continued experience of injustice in certain ways that he finally says, this can't happen again to anyone else. And he starts to see the dynamics of villainry, if you will, or oppression, in a more systemic way. And as you see in the books, he begins to deal with it. One of my big things is always like, how does Bruce Wayne or how does Peter Parker deal with certain injustices outside of the mask? And so Alton as Thorn and Alton as, community leader has two different approaches to how he can do both. And so because of the ways that he's experienced injustice from the, from a legal standpoint, from the justice system, then he kind of starts to navigate that both as Thorn and as Alton as an adult. That's kind of the best way to say that without, just giving you the script ahead of time. But yeah.
Now, speaking of the script, Sheldon, in your part in playing into this, and when you pretty much got to read like the issue 0 and just this first issue, without looking at any type of color or ink that hit the pavement, as far as just reading this mini and in that first issue, what were your thoughts going in, I guess, creating an aid to Travis and putting this together?
Well, for me, the initial attraction for me, as with any type of comic book, was the art. Just when I saw that art, just alone, that's what kind of sort of drew me in. I was interested with that, and let's not ignore sort of like the elephant in the room. One of the things that also attracted me was the race of the character. I kind of always tell this story. Like years ago, I was in this comic book creator contest at San Diego Comic-Con. And, I'm a nerd, I'm a loser. You saw actually today for the Zoom, I actually tend to show up to things early. So I showed up to this thing early, it's just me and my mom, and we were the only ones there. And then slowly but surely, people start trickling in. Everybody just start trickling in. About an hour when we're about ready to start, all the Black people were at the same table. We were all sitting at the same table. We didn't even know each other, but somehow we all ended up at the same table. And there's sort of like this subconscious pull. For me, when I think about it, I've always kind of sort of been drawn to Black characters. Even on the DC side, I'm not even a really big DC guy, for example, but I like all the Black DC characters. John Stewart, I like Cyborg. So for me, I'm always kind of sort of drawn to characters that kind of look like the world that I grew up in or that I can recognize. So that was the first initial thing. The other initial thing, Travis probably isn't even aware of this, is that Thorn it's I hesitate to call it an all ages book because that kind of, that can come off as a pejorative a little bit. Oh, it's a kiddie book. It's not a kiddie book, but it is an all ages book. And if you're familiar with my writing, it's like, I have to like hide my books from my mom. So I was really interested to kind of sort of work on a book, that I wouldn't be embarrassed to show my mom, hey, look, I helped work on this, Mom. You can actually leave this one on the coffee table. It doesn't have like the robots having sex with people or anything like that. So, that was a huge draw for me as well. But the other thing, and this was the biggest draw for me, was just how passionate Travis was in selling it to me. I've known Travis from before I even necessarily even knew that he was writing Thorn. And one of the things I love and I appreciate about Travis and some of the other guys that I follow on Twitter is they have a passion for comic books. They have a passion for this medium. And I have a passion for this medium. And I can see it just the way he lit up. The only other time he lights up is when he's talking about like the Mavericks or something. But just the way he like lit up when he was talking about Thorn, I could tell this was something that he was personally invested in. And it kind of reminded me when I first did my creator-owned book a little bit, like, this is personal. This is something that's personal to him. And, if I can help in any way, shape, or form, guide him, add some level of authenticity to what he's doing, it will be my pleasure. Because, you know, for me, I truly want to see everybody win, especially people who love comics. And if they're doing it, telling stories about underrepresented, you know, demographic, you know, I'm with it. I'm with it. So it really didn't take too much convincing on Travis's part for me.
Dope. Dope. Now, to get into the character itself, the setting is, of course, a big part of it, because the backdrop of the Deep South, of course, is taking place in a fictional town called Rosebush Heights, Texas. Now, if you could, I know you explained to me earlier that, of course, well, the both of you grew up in the South. So as far as, I guess, what pretty much drew in the setting for this story, exactly what a young black teen, and yet that grows up to be a vigilante in this neighborhood, what that would take to be somebody from this neighborhood, to have this sort of passion towards this neighborhood. What did that mean to you?
So first, the Rosebush Heights is a neighborhood in Dallas
Mhm.
in the book. So and I modeled that after the Roseland Townhomes is a DHA government housing complex that I worked and lived in from 2015 to 2020, November 2020, until I moved. And I ran the community center. So kind of I modeled Alton after my boss over there a little bit. So it's a situation I'm familiar with. It's a, you know, a neighborhood and the demographics I'm familiar with. And then another neighborhood very similar in Dallas is where I go to church, called Dolphin Heights. So I put those together. I didn't want to like model it after a real neighborhood and make any neighborhood feel particularly singled out with what I was trying to say in the book. So I made a fictional neighborhood out of these places, but also, you know, Thorn defending the Rosebush, right? So there you go. It also has that comic book, you know, vibe to it in the naming of the place. But so that was a factor of where I exist, the neighborhood, and a little bit, you know, my time in Shreveport. For the most of it, I lived in Sunset Acres. Again, it's another. If anybody can go to my website, travisbhill.com, and read the first chapter of Mustard Seed. That's a semi-autobiographical comic about my last 2 years living in Shreveport and Sunset Acres. And so you can kind of see kind of how that neighborhood is depicted with some authenticity. So taking in the world that I'm inhabiting, right? And then seeing just kind of the way that certain civil justice is not equitable or not upheld in a certain way with with where I live and the people that I work with. It kind of got to a point where it was very frustrating, right? Very frustrating. And so two things happened. I mean, I love comic books, and I've been reading comic books since I was like, can remember, since my grandma handed me like an issue of Batman, you know, Bam Pow slapstick Batman. But when I was like 5, and since then I've been reading comic books. And so my thought was, what kind of hero? You see Bruce Wayne, right? And what happens to his parents? And he says, I can't let this happen again. His whole sense of justice comes from that moment, and how he's going to define villainry throughout his life and be the force to stop it, right? Same with Peter Parker, but that's more of his guilt, and there's a lot of things, but that is a lot of the vigilante trope, right? So I think about what kind of, if there was going to be a comic book hero, to step up and stop this type of injustice that could perceive it from a young age, like you keep asking that question, and then look at it and say, this is the evil that you have to stop. Then what kind of hero grows up? And what do they become, right? So that's the first thing that was kind of going on. The second thing that I've talked about in a couple other podcasts is I'm a PhD student at UT Dallas, and one of my fields is civil rights history. And so, studying that in the South is just tough all the time, just to think about and just the history of all that. And, but I got the chance there was a conference at UT Dallas for grad students, and the theme of the conference was origins and origin stories. So I'm thinking about kind of racial justice and civil rights and origins, and then of course comic book origins. So I presented a paper where I really started thinking about this character Thorn, presenting kind of what would it mean to be a Black vigilante in an anti-Black world, like the way the world is shaped right now.
Right.
Just generally anti-Black. And so that's where I started kind of playing with these themes in this presentation that I gave, which would eventually lead to the development of Thorn Zero. And so just asking those questions really led to a lot of this. And then of course, the summer, the murder of George Floyd kind of really had me, just frustrated in a way. And one way that I deal with my kind of anger is to write. And so that's when I really kind of got to work on the story that is now Thorn. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, but that's where things all came to a head. And then of course I chose Dallas just because, I love reading. One thing I like about, Marvel Comics is you can tell when the writers are from New York and they know all the neighborhoods, and I can't do that. I couldn't put the character in New York because I don't know any New York neighborhoods. But I do know Dallas, and so that I can make it feel more authentic. And so I modeled it after some of the neighborhoods that I frequent and live in, and those types of things. So
right now you talk about go ahead.
I would add too is that the setting of the South is important, especially when you're telling a story about law enforcement, because the police they tend to have an outsized importance in the South, in comparison to the North or the West or the Northwest. They tend to have an outsized importance. The local police officer themselves are almost sort of like these mythological figures. Everybody knows them, they know of them. So they kind of sort of inhabit the city. They are an extension of the city. So that setting, it's almost sort of a supporting character in itself. And it adds to that story. It adds to the elements of, what Travis is trying to do. I don't think you would have the same effect if it took place in New York or Chicago. It would have to be a different story. The characters would be totally different. So the South, it's absolutely critical to what's going to happen in all the, the machinations that are happening there.
So now I understand that throughout the story, the layers can get a little bit deep. I believe, Travis, you described this as if Thorn is Batman, then basically Commissioner Gordon is pretty much his main villain.
Right.
So outside of that, your normal vigilante trope, you're dealing with a protagonist that is more so dealing with the injustice of maybe just law enforcement, be it behold the cops. But since he is also a community leader and works at the community center, he's also understanding that there's evils at play deep within the government itself, maybe even local government, maybe even outside. So there's gentrification happening in his community as well. And then there's also, of course, forces outside of his own understanding that might be dealing with the demise of his own neighborhood. That's why he feels he has to get more involved, even when he's not in uniform.
Right.
What necessarily was would you say in future issues, we see him in these squabbles with the police and everything like that, but being how he is a multifaceted character, outside of that, when you're looking at the character of Alton Eldridge, what is he going to do outside of that uniform to create change in his community?
Yeah, so gentrification is a big evil that he's trying to deal with, and that's something that again, living in the Roseland neighborhood, very much happened in Dallas. I live in the neighborhood I live in now because we got notice that my wife and I lived in low income affordable housing, and we got notification that our apartments were being sold. And our whole the whole neighborhood that we used to live in was all affordable housing, and now, other than just the Dallas Housing Authority property, is pretty much all been bought up and turned into very expensive living, and I got to see a bunch of the evils of that. From man, I'm not going to name any churches, but there was a church that I worked for, a nonprofit that was religious affiliated, and there was a very specific church that we would constantly try to associate ourselves with that was very wealthy and set up in the very wealthy part of Dallas. And they continuously told us, like, hey, we want to help y'all as much as we can, but we can't like adopt y'all as an organization. And I was like, that's fine. Like, I understood that, but like our leadership maybe didn't. But the moment that neighborhood became financially lucrative, the church stepped in and bought up all the property that the organization I used to work for owned and turned it into an extension church. The moment it became not a low income neighborhood, but it was something that they could profit off of, that was a wrap. And I saw that happen, not with this one church, but with a couple others. And I'm just like, from city planning, and it's, I've had plenty of conversations with DHA, and I try to present them in the book. Dallas Housing Authority is represented in the book, and there's a lot of people in the DHA that really want to see those housing authority communities thrive, and then there's people in the development district that want to get rid of those housing complexes and do something. And so it's all really complex. And so, Alton has to be in the middle of those and figure out how to navigate, housing authority, city planning, nonprofits, all those types of things, because everybody's trying to get a piece of something that could be super valuable if they can just push people out and displace people and get them out of their homes and take over. And so again, and this is stuff that happened to me, that it was happening to my neighbors. And it's just like, again, just in imagining, there's somebody, God, it was a great quote. And I wish I have it written somewhere, but it's that liberation is about building the plane while you're flying it. And you got to be creative, and you have to think about the future in these very creative ways. And Thorn is a very grounded, kind of gritty vigilante book, but it also isn't about imagining a world where you get to stop that stuff,
right?
And then maybe encourage other people to stop that stuff and that kind of thing. So, anyways.
Right. And it can also be seen as a detailed guide as to how maybe de facto local governments can be working against you sometimes.
Right. And so then you have to figure out who in those local governments can help you and how to navigate that. And again, I don't have all the answers. There are tons of people doing excellent work in this area, and I'm just trying to read and see what they're doing and their activism and learn it for myself. I mean, my my pastor and his wife, our first lady, are very involved. You know, Ulysses Waters is our first lady, and she heads up a justice coalition called Reimagine Justice that thinks on these things. And I get to be in these planning meetings and just, I don't do a lot of talking. I'm like, yeah, tell me how we're gonna fight this, and just point me in a direction. That's all we're gonna do. And so, there's a lot of people doing good work, and if I can just highlight a little bit of it in this book and get people thinking in those directions and point in those directions, then it's a win. That's it. And tell a good story at the same time. You know, I don't want to dismiss that, because
I think that's important too. Like it's, you know, some of the themes are complex and deep, but we also gotta, you know, highlight that the book is entertaining and it's exciting. You know, it's not like you know, like that's like that old movie, what was it, Don't Be a Menace to South Central, or Drink Your Juice in the Hood. Like, it's not just like message, you know what I mean? Like it's a legit dope book. You know, it's got, you know, action, it's chock full of action. Actually, it's a superhero book. It is a superhero book. So, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up. And I kind of sort of just wanted to preface my next comments with that as well, because, you know, it is complex, because it speaks to, you know, that whole, you know, conundrum of, all right, not every problem can be solved with blunt force. You know, there are issues that you can't just beat up and they're just going to go away. And then usually, if you think about it, those issues are a little bit more difficult and complicated to solve. And they feed into each other more times than not, which is kind of the dirty secret. So it kind of speaks to your point about how local governments actually can be working against some of these people's best interests. So, you know, like I said, there's a lot more, you know, that meets the eye. With Thorn, there's a lot of stuff that's bubbling under the surface. A lot of it is unspoken, but it's there if you see it. Like I said, it's a superhero book first and foremost, but those things are still there. Those things still exist, and you know, they're on the periphery, and you know, it adds up to a whole eventually. You know, Travis is working towards something, and then you'll see it play out issue by issue. And it's not one of these, you know, X-Files things where, you know, he's promising you, hey, it's gonna happen, and then it never happens. You know, something's gonna happen every issue, you know, and it's gonna keep building up.
Yeah.
And I like what.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I like what Sheldon said about how it's not like message, because that was something that this team, from Sheldon to myself to Mark, to Razul, Barry, our editor, all of us have continuously been in agreement about this can't be preachy. It can't be soapbox. It can't. There can't be some. Now, every moment, you know, just like in comic books, like to get something across, you get to talk to the news and do like a newscast right in the background. Like, but you can't, even that has been very cautious about. This cannot be preaching at any point. It has to be a story that is good, and that the context and the subtext can be caught without having to be explicit. So that is something that I really, really appreciate the team that's been built, because everybody's thinking in that direction about, like, we got to make it a good story. It has to, like Sheldon said, it has to be a superhero story. It has to be a vigilante story. And then these other things that we're trying to do need to be woven into the context and the life of the story, and not, you know, Chris Claremont preaching exposition or something. No disrespect to Chris Claremont, though, because that man put every great X-Men character into the fold. So
yeah, he also wrote Kitty Pryde, but I won't go here. You know what I'm saying? They ain't gonna go there.
you get some misses sometimes.
Definite. Yeah, and it went to but okay. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But also outside of this, just shout out to your creative team, Mark Pate, that constructed the look of the character. Initially, when you see this character in the cover photos and in the interior, the outfit is beyond dope.
Bro.
When y'all saw that for the first time, like when he actually like constructed that, I'm sure, of course, there was that aid of like how I wanted this character to look. The ultimate like vigilante look that you wanted for him. When Mark came up with that finally, and just you saw a little sprinkle of color, maybe even you saw just the inks. What did you think?
Man, let me tell you this. I fell out because I wish I could pull up what I gave Mark. I said, because I really wanted, because here was the thing we started, because again, we want it to be a good vigilante superhero comic book. That's what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And the thing for me has always been, what is important to superheroes on their uniform? The emblem, whatever their emblem is. That's what people want to buy and put on their shirts, and that's what people want. That's how they associate with characters. Like that's what DC has gotten right? Like you see Flash, Green Lantern, Batman, Superman, boom, right here. That's what you see. You don't even. I couldn't pick. You couldn't get a Thor shirt. They don't have. You see what I'm saying? Some of those miss the mark. Right?
Funnily enough, the most popular Marvel emblem is probably the most problematic one these days, and that's the Punisher one.
Yeah,
so,
sure, right.
Yeah. But it still speaks to Travis's point about you see that Punisher icon, that logo, that's the Punisher.
Yeah,
Yep.
So I gave him.
Well, and of course, if you have kids, you're telling them don't go buy that truck. Also, now if you see the Punisher skull,
that's true.
Right. So there's the Liberation Fist, right? Just one, it sends a message about what this character is doing, right? That the raised fist has been associated with liberation movements and justice movements. I mean, you see it right now with the writer's strike. It's the raised fist with a pencil in your hand, right? But for over 100 years now, that raised fist has been emblematic of these movements. So I thought that means something at the center of this, but what is it going to be? And so when I knew what the neighborhood was, right, Rosebush, there was always this one version of that raised fist that I love. It's the fist with a rose inside of it, meaning we're going to fight, but we're going to bring peace to our, hopefully between us, but to our group, we're going to bring peace. And that was my thing. I said, Mark, let's put this in the middle of his chest, a fist with a rose in it. And he goes, man, that's going to be too hard to draw. That's too many lines. He was like, he's like, let me take this and let me work on something. I said, okay. About a week later, he sent it back and he was like, hey, I turned the rose into a shield. What do you think? And I fell out. I said, that's it. Like that. He's like, I think it hits everything you want. Like a defender, a protector, a liberator, and a peacemaker at the end of the day. And I said, you're the best. Like Mark, the care that Mark puts into every page and every line is unreal. And what he did with that was great. And then as we filled out the rest of it, everything he's thinking of, because as you get more into Alton's backstory, he's a boxer. Yeah. So he's got a little bit of a, kind of a daredevil upbringing, like he's boxing and this kind of thing. And so Mark really looked at like, okay, if you're a boxer, like how do you spar? Okay, you're going to wear these body pads. So let's kind of construct it like this. But I was like, Mark, he's got to be in a hoodie. There's that, okay. That feels very, because of the nature. I still remember this moment in Shreveport, Louisiana. It's illegal to have a hood pulled inside any establishment. You can't have your hood pulled. If you are in your hood, you can get fined.
Okay.
It's stupid, right?
Right.
But and again, if you look at that law, it's very racialized, right?
Right.
But I still remember the moment where I was pulled over for there was I played basketball in college. And I was leaving our arena one night, and our campus wasn't very big, and this was in Shreveport. And I was walking, to meet my buddy. So it's like our arena, and then there's a row of restaurants right on the other side of our arena. Then across the street is our campus. So my buddy, and then our dorms were on the backside of the campus. So my buddy was like parked in front of one of these restaurants, but it's like midnight and I'm leaving the arena, and I go and get in his car and we drive off. Next thing you know, as we're kind of entering the backside of campus, we're getting pulled over, guns drawn. It's nuts. And I'm like, what is going on? step out of the car, keep your hands where we can see them, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, what's going on? And so then eventually we explained, like, yo, I'm on the basketball team here. I was leaving. They thought we had robbed the restaurant. And one of the main things the officer said was, if you didn't have your hood pulled, we probably wouldn't have tried to stop you or something like that. And I was just like, nah, I don't know what kind of show this is, but nah, F that, F you, you know? And so, but just thinking about the nature of the criminalization of this hood being pulled, it, you know, from a personal story to seeing how it's criminalized legally in the law, it's criminalized.
Right. And
it's a racial criminalization. And I said, man, let's have this dude really being what, you know, cops spearing people in a hoodie. You know, what are we doing? And so let's give it like a middle finger to what, you know, police officers in the South or whatever.
Right.
And so I just thought that would be one, it's intimidating, I think, and I think it looks cool. So I think it looks cool and it's intimidating, but it's also like, you know, this thing that has been racially criminalized to a ridiculous degree. So that was important to me. But then Mark decked it out. Like we kind of filled out the suit. You know, he's got his Thorn shooters, which I don't know if that appeared in the first issue, but
in the first issue, yeah.
I can't remember what issues he uses them in, but so he's got those on the wrist. We were really trying to come up with, like, you know, thwip, and you know, this claw. We were trying to come up with something. So
a sound effect.
A sound effect that people will say and associate specifically with the character, like Spider-Man and Wolverine. Again, we're really putting a lot of care into this character as we go, because we want the character to be memorable in certain ways. And so I don't know if it is, but you'll see as you go on. It's like PFT. So maybe not, but we tried. So anyway, so that's kind of how that suit developed. But when I saw it all together for the first time, it was that cover to issue 0. That was the first time I saw it, and I was like,
yeah.
He had drawn some design. He had given me the emblem, and then he had drawn a character sheet, and I was like, yo, this is gonna be great. But when the first time I saw it was when Thorn's bashing in the hood of this car from landing from on high, and I was like, yeah, this is it. This is the guy.
Yeah. Nah, that covers flames. I gotta agree with that. Now,
I would just also just kind of interject, kind of sort of on a tangent, just a side note for just any, you know, aspiring writers or creators out there. Usually, if your artist takes something that you wrote in a different direction, 9 times out of 10, probably 10 times out of 10, his idea is better.
Yeah,
his idea is going to be better. It's going to be way better than what you wrote. And you never imagined that it will come out that good. So I suspect that's what Travis is talking about. And it's one of the reasons why it's really important when we talk about artists that they're built equally with the writer. Because again, it's a visual medium, and a lot of the stuff they do, unless you're behind the scenes with the script and seeing what's on the script and what ends up on the page, you will never know just how much the artist contributes. So yeah, writers out there, if your artist says he's got a better idea,
take it.
Yeah, go ahead and let
That's it. That's right.
Now, you could have pitched this storyline to anybody. There's plenty of publishers out there that could have taken this, or maybe they wouldn't have, but you decided to go a different route. You went to Advent Comics. Tony Cottrell is correct?
Tony Cottrell, yeah.
Was that the first person that you went to? You was like, Tony, I got something that'll probably blow your mind.
So let me tell you how that worked out. Here's what happened. I put Thorn up on those, like, they used to have these like pitch things that you can have like on Twitter. Like there was a pitch day and you can put up like I put Thorn up there. I put another comic Black Gun, another comic Mustard Seed. I put those up there just to get attention, see if anybody liked the idea or whatever. But we had this, so Mark and I did the 0 issue with just ourselves. I will say that. So like we didn't have Tony, we didn't have Razul, we didn't have Sheldon at the time. That was just it. And I remember, but I had been, this was in like late 2019 or the beginning of 2020, and we had that. Late 2019, that's right. But at that point, I had been kind of keyed in on Advent for a while. Like, just really enjoyed what Tony was doing with his characters, with Titan, with Blackfire, with Crescent, and just kind of some of the stories he was putting out, some of the one shots, just kind of getting into knowing the characters. And I told Mark, I said, man, this Zero issue was good. I think I thought the Zero issue hit what it needed to hit in terms of introducing a character and the themes and just, the dynamics. And I hadn't written anything else though yet. Nothing else.
Okay.
And I told Mark, I said, Mark, this can't happen without a Black publisher. Like, it just, and here's the thing, because I am tired. I'm glad, Sheldon talking about how he gravitates towards, Black characters and really enjoys those. I have been working in community centers. Not now. I am fortunate to do full-time comics right now, but before this year, I had been working in community centers in predominantly Black neighborhoods where 98% of the kids I work with every day, after school, over the summer, are Black for a decade plus, 13, 14 years. And I'm tired of seeing white characters. I am a comic book writer, and I wanted to be able to take comic books. I remember there's this one short story I did that hopefully will have a life later, but Dakari, the third most famous space pirate in the galaxy. And so it's this kind of Black Han Solo type character doing this goofy heist. That's what he's doing. And I had that printed and gave out copies to the kids at the community center and the middle schoolers, and they loved it. And my thing was like, if I'm going to write comics, I'm going to do it for the kids that I work with every day. That's what I'm doing.
Right.
And so that was a big thing for me. But because of that, one, Mustard Seed is about me and my best friend, JP Sloan, who is Black, and a homeless teenager coming to live with us for 2 years, who is also Black. So two of the three main characters, or three of the four main characters in the story, are Black. Black Gun is kind of a fictionalized kind of, it's not Bass Reeves, but it's kind of modeled after that, like Old West. The main character is Black. Dakari, the main character, is Black. Thorn, the main character is Black. So I had a conversation with an editor at Scout, who I won't name. Sheldon knows who I'm talking about. But and then I had a really good conversation with an editor at Vault, who both of them really liked the work, but they both told me, hey, we can't publish your stuff because we just can't let you write Black characters. Like, we just can't. Like, that's not something that we're willing to do at Vault or at Scout. And I'm not trying to put them on blast, because that's fine. That's fine if that's what you want to decide. And so I was thinking through that. I was really kind of having a, whatever, like, what does this mean? Like, I'm trying to write for a particular group that I care about, like the kids. I'm not talking about Black people. I'm trying to write for the kids that I care about,
right?
That I do life with every day. I want them to have good stories to read. And if I'm gonna be a comic book writer, I want them to read my stuff and really associate with it in some way. So I'm trying to take that with this reality of what I'm being told about my work. Like, it's good, but we will never publish it. Okay, fine. So then JP, my buddy, he's the guy at Rutgers now. I told him, I was like, hey, here's kind of the reality of what I'm getting. And he said, man, that's fine, but who owns those companies? And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, white people own those companies. Like, that's not, like, so they're gonna promote minority creators to make money for themselves. And I said, okay, that's fair. He's like, and so that got me thinking. So I was taking all of that in my brain and reflecting on a lot of that. And I finally told Mark, I said, man, we can't do Thorn unless it's a Black publisher. We just can't do it. We just won't be, it won't happen. It won't happen. It won't happen. And so I told him, this was in September, October, fall 2019. I said, man, if Tony Cottrell, I said, if Tony over at Advent wanted Thorn, I would die. I would just, that would be it. That would be, because Mark asked me, well, do you know any Black publishers? Have you identified any? And I said, Tony's got a really cool superhero universe over at Advent. I would love that. That would be the dream for me. So I never pitched anything to Tony, but Tony did like an open call for some of his Kickstarters where he said, hey, I need some first issues or some giveaways to put in, the Kickstarters do that like indie bundle for $1 or whatever. Yeah. And so Tony kind of put out on Twitter, hey, I need this or whatever. And I said, Tony, I've got this Thorn Zero, if you would like to include it as a freebie on your Kickstarter. And he said, yeah, let me check it out. And he read it and he's like, oh man, I love it. I'll put it in the package. I said, great, awesome. And so about this time I had already started like cathartically writing issues of Thorn, with no intention of anything happening other than just me writing a bunch of scripts that take up space on my laptop, I guess, but hoping one day, whatever. So then, September 2021, Tony messages me and goes, hey man, I got Diamond distribution now. Do you want to bring Thorn over to Advent? And I remember where I was. I'm going to Dallas Fan Expo this weekend. I have a table there. But they were doing it in September that year. I was at Dallas Fan Expo setting up my table, and I just sat down and kind of teared up a little bit. And so I said, absolutely. And I called Mark and I was like, this is it. Like, we might never make a dime off this book, and I do not care. I just want it to be out there with Advent, and and that's what happened. That's kind of the story of it. And so then I told Tony I would like him to look over the script. I had an outline of the first 4 issues and then kind of a loose outline of the 12-issue series. And he looked it over and said, yeah, I like this. And let's set up a meeting. And so we met to kind of talk out the specifics. And he was like, do you guys just want to like try the first 4 issues, or what do you guys want to do? And I said, Tony, whatever you want, but this story is 12. And he goes, let's do 12. I said, oh, okay, awesome. And so from there it was a go, and we started working on it. And then eventually Mark and I kind of both decided, hey, we need eyes that our eyes are a little too white for this. We need to bring some Black voices into the script process, to the story process.
Right.
And we both agreed on that. And so the first, I'm telling you, Sheldon has always been the person I was like, man, if I could ever co-write a book with anyone, it would be him. Because if you've read any of Sheldon's dialogue, it's the best dialogue. I continue to say this. I've said it on like every podcast I've been on, but it's the best dialogue I've read in comics, period. Doesn't matter. Because it just feels so natural. Every character has a unique voice. And Sheldon really understands who his characters are and how, not just what they want or what, but how they speak. And I remember, again, I tell the story all the time. I was in Forbidden Comics with Mark in New York, and we were just walking around, and I was just flipping through some, reading the first couple of pages, reading the first couple of pages of issue 1s, just picking them up, flipping through them. And I picked up Snatched, Sheldon's series. And I read the first couple of pages and said, yo, what is this? And I sat there, I read the whole thing in like 10 minutes. I just was like, and then there were a couple issues on the shelf. I bought like all 3 of them or whatever was up there immediately. And so then I found Sheldon on Twitter, like as I was leaving the store, and then like sent a message and be like, yo, I love this book. Like, when's the next one coming out? So, and now I've read like all of his stuff. And so when it came time,
I never get tired of that story, by the way. FYI.
It's just the truth.
I just want to say something too, though, just listening to Travis speak. Just how I was saying that, it wasn't a message book. I think it's important also to emphasize too. I kind of just grimace about and bristle about this in general, not just with Thorn, but just in a lot of media that this can apply to. I hate the notion of, okay, this is a Black movie or this is a Black comic book. Thorn is for everybody. Thorn is for everybody. It is not just for a Black audience. It's for white audience, Latino audience, Asian audience. It doesn't matter. It's for everybody. Because I know, you know, James and I, we were kind of briefly talking. We're making a little joke about Spider-Verse film before the Zoom started. And you see how much money that film made.
Yeah.
This opening weekend. You go to the theater, you look around, you see America represented. You see every demographic there. You see little white kids dressed up as Miles Morales. So if you do your story right and you're true to your characters, those themes, they're going to transcend race. So yeah, the Black characters are up front, and I'm not trying to, you know, diminish the importance of representation, because it is important, but it's also important for me to tell people, you know, just because a story has Black characters front and center doesn't mean it's only just for that audience. You know, we're talking about adventure. We're talking about themes of gentrification, which, by the way, affects everybody, which is, you can make an argument, is as much of a class issue as much as it is a race issue. We're talking about issues of vigilantism. So this isn't just the Black issue. This is an American issue. So it's also important for me to get that across as well. You know, that's something that also attracted me. You know, when we talk about superheroes, the thing is, you know, I was thinking about this like a couple of months ago. It's just like insane how much of my worldview and my sense of justice has been shaped by Superman or Batman.
For sure.
Arguably, they've had more of an impact on my worldview and how I approach justice than any civics lesson that you can give. You know, I'm relating to Batman and Spider-Man and Captain America, Superman, you know, Blade, John Stewart, Luke Cage, all these guys. That came from comic books. And so, you know, not Thor, but Thorn gave me that sense of justice. You know, how are we going to approach justice? It made me, you know, it just kind of gave me that feeling, you know, when I first started reading comic books, and how I was just drawn into it and sucked into that world. So it's just important for me to just put that out there as well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, so immediately my first thought when Mark and I were having these conversations was to bring Sheldon on. And we've had so many conversations since then about these things, and just Sheldon's understanding of the medium, not just comic book medium, but also the vigilante genre, has been super helpful, in addition to what I think is fantastic dialogue notes always. And then Rasul Berry, Mark knew him through a former coworker who now works with Rasul. And Rasul is he's a pastor in New York, but he's also a film producer. He produced the film documentary film Juneteenth, Faith and Freedom, which is now on like every major PBS market and will be shown all month. So, and he's won like so many awards for that documentary. So he's an award-winning documentary filmmaker. And he also runs a successful podcast called Where You From? And so, you know, he understands story medium, these different types of things. So Mark just wanted to get his opinion on Thorn in general, kind of blank slate, gave him the 0 issue, and he loved it. And so they met up, talked. Mark was like, yo, you got to meet Rasul. We just, you know, we should talk about Thorn. I was like, well, awesome. Let him read issue 1 and 2, because we had issue 1 and 2 done completely, art, everything. So he reads them. And then we set up a little Zoom meeting, and we're just talking, because I just want his feedback. We just wanted his feedback, and he wanted to give some, you know, just some feedback. And he was like, can I give you some comments? And he broke down like everything that he would do to enhance issue 1 and 2. And I'm just taking notes. And I'm like, yo, this is awesome. Like these few notes, I could probably find them now, but these few notes like leveled up the book. And so then, you know, we set up another meeting like a week later, and we were like, Rasul, do you want to, I know you're doing a million things, but do you want to be the editor of this book? And so he's like, well, I have this going on, this going on, this going on. I said, I'm not hearing a no, though. I'm not hearing a no. And so he eventually agreed to come on as the editor. And so just been great, have 4 people in dialogue about the story and then believing in it, and 5, including Tony. Tony being willing to take a chance on it and think that it had value. I mean, I'm still humbled, so humbled that he reached out to me and wanted the story. And my eventual goal, because right now the story is kind of in a Vertigo to DC Comics type thing. It's on the imprint side.
Yeah.
But we've had preliminary talks about bringing it over into the main universe after this run, and making some guest appearances in other books and doing some crossover. So we're planning that out. But my eventual goal is to let this character go into the universe, and then eventually someone else write it, just like someone else wrote Batman after, Bill Finger and Bob Kane. Somebody, and just because there are other people who can see what Thorn's purpose is, and can think about creative ways of liberation and defense against injustice than I can, and that maybe our whole team of 4 people can. And so my hope is it's a character that has a life outside of me, and that other people can weigh in on how to take what the character stands for and continue to move forward. That's what I think is great about good vigilante and superhero characters like Sheldon, referencing Superman and Batman and Justice, is that they can continue to evolve to fight the problems that people face, and speak to injustices that people face. And so again, that's been ever since Tony called me or hit me up about bringing Thorn on. That's been my hope, is that someday this character outlives me and someone else takes it over. And I mean, I have 12 issues under contract and 24 mapped out. And then after that, I would love to hand it off. Just so Sheldon can write it all next. After that, I'll be tired.
You know what? Look, I feel as though with the story itself, you definitely got a lot of people behind you, and definitely a belief system between 5 people that this character can essentially just thrive throughout, like, basically those entire 12 issues, and do extremely well. And with somebody like Tony basically doing a lot of the distribution and the creative team and the writers and the editors that are involved, it can only go sky's the limit, So for one, I appreciate the both of you for being on here, Travis, Sheldon. This has been amazing. This is a great talk. Now note, I know on previews world, Thorn will get in everybody's hands. Was it July 5th?
July 5th is the release day in shops.
Yeah, if you order it now. So for anybody that's out there that wants to get a chance of getting this book now, issue 0 is on Travis's website. That's travisbhillcomics.com, correct?
That's right.
Yep. And issue 1 is right now for pre-order, and we'll get in everybody's hands. Was it right at July 5th, correct?
So pre-order is closed. It closed a couple of days ago. So if you're listening to this, you're just gonna have to hit up your local shop. If they don't have it, you can reach out to me or Advent to see how many extra copies they're gonna have in their own store. But if not, it'll be available digitally, I believe, on Global Comics. So
okay,
yeah. So that's so right now you're. I mean, I want to read it, please, and hit me up, and I'll try my best to get you a physical copy. Just don't know what the numbers are going to look like yet. But it will be available digitally if you miss the pre-order window.
Got you. Definitely.
Yep.
So Trav, Sheldon, thank you for being here. This has been amazing. Thank you everybody for joining us. Get Thorn while you can. If you were able to get it digitally on Global Comics, do that. So for Grandmaster Facts, James Grandmaster Facts voice, Travis B. Hill, Sheldon Allen, we are out.